Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most? And do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
All right, welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Tim Little. He is the founder and CEO of Zana Investments, a Tampa-based real estate investment firm named after his daughters, Zara and Lena. He's passionate about helping fellow military veterans escape the landlord trap and get competitive returns by providing opportunities to invest passively in apartment buildings. Tim started his investment in real estate with a duplex back in 2014 and has grown his portfolio to 693 co-owned units valued at over $90 million. Practicing what he preaches, he also invests passively. So, Tim, welcome to the show.
Keith, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here as well. And I can't wait to dive into your story. What I typically will do, Tim, is I'll start with, kind of where you grew up. So if you could just tell us maybe where you grew up and, what eventually led you to real estate.
Yeah, the where you're from question is always kind of a windy road. So I was born in New Jersey, but, parents split up. So I wound up living between Connecticut and New Jersey. Finally settling with my dad in New Jersey around fourth grade. And then New Jersey prices, especially taxes there, got really, really high at a certain point, property taxes especially. So we were looking to go somewhere a little more affordable. Moved down to West Virginia because my grandparents lived there and so did my aunt and uncle. And we're like, wow, we know it's a lot cheaper and it's beautiful country, etc. Yeah, that was great. It was cheaper, but there were no jobs. So after a couple of futile attempts by my dad to do some entrepreneurial endeavors, he was doing vending machines for a little while, and then he was selling Kirby vacuum cleaners for a little while. I don't know if anyone is old enough to remember what those are. The $1,000 vacuum cleaners that people used to go door to door selling.
Right.
I'm sure you can imagine how that went over in rural West Virginia. So needless to say, we didn't stay there too long. And then we had, my dad had some like uncles and stuff like that down in Florida, Central Florida. So we had visited there and he headed down there, found a house. And that's where I actually wound up finishing out high school and really call home today, right? So that was in the Deltona area, which most people haven't heard of Deltona, but it's just about 20 miles inland from Daytona Beach, same county.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So that is the where I grew up. And then, a month after I graduated high school, I was in the Army. I was at basic training. So fresh, went in there at 18. I asked to go to Germany for my first duty station because I knew a little bit of German, did foreign student exchange, which kind of opened my eyes to international travel and all that. Put it down on my list for number 1, 2, and 3. And so the Army sent me to Korea. And so that introduced me to the other half of the world. And obviously I found that just as interesting. And then I wound up only doing like a 2.5 year stint. That's how long my commitment was. because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, right? And I didn't want to commit 4 or 5 years if I didn't know if I was going to like it. So wound up getting out, but having to do additional time in the National Guard, which I did while I was in school at Florida State, um, getting my degree in international affairs. And at some point along the line, the ROTC recruiter got to me and was like, hey, you might have something to offer having been enlisted yourself, starting at the bottom, leading soldiers. Oh, and by the way, you have a guaranteed job when you graduate college. And I was like, all of those things sound good. So went ahead, joined the ROTC program, and when I graduated, became a second lieutenant in the Army. So went back in for a good little over 5 years and multiple combat deployments to Iraq later. Was out and decided to go to grad school at that point, and that's where I was really trying to figure out, what I was going to do with my life. And everyone had always told me, go to school, get a good job, and so that's what I was trying to do. Wound up getting a job with a government contractor, but got kind of bored with it and wound up going back to the military later, anyways. So um, I could stop there, and then we could talk about the how real estate kind of snuck into the picture, if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. It sounds like a very interesting adventure for you, really. Being able to get out there and not knowing for sure that you were going to stay, but yet kind of continuing to go back to the military, which is good. Tell me a little bit about your degree program that you studied, though. I think you said it was foreign affairs, or what was the motivation behind that? And that's just not one I heard of that often. So,
yeah, international affairs. So, I mean, it really started because I got so interested in, just other cultures, having gone to Europe when I was in high school. And, that's a big deal. The first time you go outside the US and you see all these things that are so different. We wound up going to, I think, like Austria, Germany, Venice, and just seeing all these things at 16 years old, that had a big impact on me. And then going from that, and a couple of years later, going to Korea and just seeing a completely different culture. And I just knew that I wanted to do something that provided me the opportunity to travel and engage with different cultures and stuff like that. So I pursued an international affairs degree. At a certain point, it almost doesn't matter once you're in ROTC because you're going into the Army anyways.
Right.
So a lot of people just wind up getting like criminology degrees or something. That way they can become a cop after they get out of the Army and stuff. But that's what I wound up going with. But I do think it was useful in the sense that I very much did wind up engaging in a big way with other peoples and cultures. I was essentially helping, these local governments rebuild and, figure out how to run efficiently. So I couldn't have asked for anything more from the perspective of using my degree in that sense.
Yeah, sure. That's interesting. Okay. Well, then, and you said after that you worked for a contractor or a government contractor. What type of work did you do for them?
Yeah, and so that's kind of interesting. It's the recruiter got to me and they're like, "We think you would make a good strategic communications specialist." And I was like, "I don't know why." But they saw in my resume stuff that I couldn't see in terms of, the messaging that I was doing, identifying key audiences
Hmm.
and stuff like that, and messaging to those audiences. And so I came in as a strategic communications consultant with Booz Allen, one of the big, government contractors. And I actually worked at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which is one of the, three letter agencies that no one, really knows about. They do
Right.
most of the mapping and stuff like that, the classified mapping. They do unclassified mapping as well. So it was interesting work, but I was more on the internal communication side of things, not doing like cool guy stuff in the field or anything like that. And then I continued to serve in the Army Reserve even after that. And so eventually I found myself becoming a public affairs officer on the Army Reserve side.
Hmm.
So this whole communications change management thing kind of stuck with me. And I started to use it on both sides, both the military and on the civilian side.
Yeah, I'm sure that comes in handy with what you're doing today as well. It is kind of amazing, isn't it? Where how, oftentimes people will see stuff within us that we just don't, it's not obvious to us anyway at the beginning. So that's really cool that you've built an entire career off of something that you weren't aware was a huge skill of yours. So
Yeah, and then just like you said, the ability to use things on both sides, and now all three sides, I guess. Obviously in this business, in real estate, and with anything where you're trying to raise your own profile, you have to really understand social media and engage with it, whether you like it or not.
right.
Really, just like what we're doing right now. But then you have TikTok, you have LinkedIn, you have Facebook, you have all these platforms, so I'm doing that on a daily basis, for this business. But when I switch into uniform as a public affairs officer, I'm also going and doing exercises in Thailand, where I'm handling all the images and interviews that are happening associated with those exercises for the military. So, sending those pictures to news agencies and prepping general officers for the television interviews that they're going to give to kind of hype up and hire the profile of those exercises so that people know and understand what we're doing.
That's really cool. Okay. And so you're still participating in that, even right now with your real estate. That's really cool. Gives you an opportunity to travel quite a bit. So I love Thailand. It's a great place. So, what about? So how did you get into real estate from there? I know based on your bio, you started with a duplex. I assume that was not one that you raised capital for, but could be wrong. Could be wrong. So yeah, tell us about it.
No. Yeah, and maybe if I had bought where I was living, it would have been one where I could raise capital on, because I was living in Washington D.C. at the time, which most people know is prohibitively expensive, especially for buying multifamily, 2 and 3 unit places. So I certainly didn't have the money to put a down payment on that, and so we started looking outside of our concentric circles to say, hey, what's close enough but cheap enough where we can actually invest? Because I was convinced that real estate was the thing that I wanted to do, right? Like, I'd read the books, I'd listened to the podcasts, and I was like, let's do it. We're going to buy something. And funny enough, the first property that I ever put an offer on, where I was like, all right, I got to take action, because everyone was like, you got to take massive action. Just do something. Like, it doesn't matter if you fall on your face. And so I was on, all these different, for LoopNet and this and that. And I found it was like a row home in Baltimore, and it was like $20,000. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, how bad can it be? Right? Like, I can always just fix it up and rent it out, even if I have to, put 50, 75,000 into it. Like, I have to be able to make money off this. So I put an offer in for 1,800 contingent upon inspection. And then I was like, all right, I did it. And I felt hyped, right? Like, I was excited, until I went to the inspection. And then the gravity, the reality of the situation set in as I'm doing the tour with the realtor. And I was like, there's no pipes. They had all been stolen. Like, this was one of those like blighted buildings, basically. Not like the worst, like not with like, boarded up windows, but damn near.
Yeah.
We got to the second floor, and there was like a visible slant on a room in the second floor. And I was like, what is going on here? And the guy I was doing the inspection with, the inspector was like, yeah, you're going to need to get an engineer out here for this, because I don't even know. So, and as soon as I heard the word structural engineer, I was like, nope, I'm out. Like, this was fun, but we're not doing this. Because once you get into that, you have no idea where those costs are going to go.
For sure.
Paint,
especially not on your first one either. It's like, it looks like a good deal, but there's so much unknown when you're having to get a structural engineer in there.
Yeah, especially when you start talking about foundation and you don't know what else is wrong with it at that point. So I politely said thank you, but no thank you, and wound up looking at Richmond, Virginia, which
Hmm.
was a little more affordable. But then I went to like um the I want to say worse off portion of of Richmond, but the lower income portion of Richmond, where I was able to find a couple of houses that were within my price range, and me and my wife just made a weekend out of it and toured like 5 or 6 different duplexes in a weekend, um, and wound up putting an offer in on one that we thought made sense based on the numbers. I had certain goals in mind that I wanted to get, I think it was like $200 a month per door cash flow. And
Hmm.
that was after, 10% taken off by the property manager and the mortgage, etc. And this one seemed to kind of fit the bill. So we went ahead, put an offer in it. It was $85,000 for a duplex. It
Wow.
was basically like 100-year-old house that they had just sealed up the stairwell and made the first floor one unit and the second floor another unit, and they just provided another entryway for
Okay.
that. So that that was my first one. Did everything go smoothly? No. I mean, within a month, the tenant stopped paying, and then they just upped and disappeared one night.
Hmm.
So that wasn't fun. Didn't have to evict them, but at the same time had to pay thousands of dollars to move their stuff out because they literally left everything in there.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then
Hmm.
I was dealing with a property manager who didn't want to embrace technology, didn't believe in using like Adobe Pro or anything like that. So I would get these documents that had stuff scribbled out, and then it was like a rough scan and then emailed to me. And I'm like, what is this? And you see like lines telling you to look over here. And I was like, no, we can't do this. This is, and he made it sound like I was the problem for expecting technology, for not having a portal where I could see my statements and had to keep requesting them, and he had to email them to me. Just little stuff like that that I knew other people were getting from their property managers. So
Right.
then I had to fire a property manager. So it was a bit of a rough go for that first property, but we stuck it out, and it wound up performing pretty well in the end.
Yeah, I'm sure Richmond seems like it's really been kind of a hot area. So I don't know how long ago you said that was back in 2014.
Yeah, this is in 2014, and I think we sold it in 2017.
Okay.
And we sold it for 150,
Okay.
and that was sight unseen. That was without a contingency for inspection on, like I said, like 100-year-old house. So I was like, okay, sold. Like
Right.
we're good. And then what I did, and we could talk about this more, is I did a 1031 exchange
Hmm.
from that property into a triplex here in the Tampa Bay area where it was closer to me. And then I started to self manage that so that I could save the 10% on property management, but also so I didn't have to take any money out of pocket for the down payment for that much larger, more expensive, but better cash flowing property.
Yeah, maybe for the audience, I think most people know what a 1031 is, but I think it's always good to kind of remind folks explain how that works and kind of what the benefit was for you.
Yeah, so I think the benefit that people think of most is obviously the ability to defer taxes on the sale of a property. Right? I had a significant appreciation going from 85,000 to 150,000,
Hmm.
and that would have been a pretty big tax hit. If I had to pay those taxes. So by doing a 1031 exchange, I'm able to defer those taxes, kick the can down the road, as it were. Right? So
Yeah.
what you have to do, you just find a qualified intermediary. The proceeds of that sale go directly to that qualified intermediary, and it's basically held in like escrow. So
Hmm.
you never touch it, and then those funds are used to go into a subsequent investment property that you've already identified. In my case, it was a triplex in St. Pete, and so that money was used as the down payment for the triplex, which I think is the other huge benefit that I think a lot of people don't really mention is the not having to come out of pocket for a 25% down payment for an investment property, because that's usually what it is. So that was huge for me, especially when you're talking like a $365,000 property. That the 25% would have been significant, but I didn't have to do any of that because I just moved the proceeds from that first property into the second one. And you could continue that in perpetuity, right? Like, sell it a couple years down the road and then get a fourplex and then a sixplex and so on and so on. So some people do that. They keep it going. I chose not to do that when I sold the triplex, but that was because I wanted to start kind of reinvesting into my syndication business in order to help keep that growing as well.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And all great points. Obviously, if you're wanting to take a little bit of the proceeds off the table, to put in your own account, that doesn't work with a 1031 exchange, but it is a great way to defer any capital gains taxes, as well as the recapture of depreciation that you might have taken while you own the property. So just a lot of really good benefits. And as you mentioned, there's your down payment right there. So fantastic. What about, so do you still have, you said you sold that one in order to put money into your syndication business. So did you go from the triplex into multifamily?
So it was kind of like a dual path, right? So I was doing my own, a duplex, triplex, but somewhere along the way, again, still reading the books, listening to the podcast. And then I had started going to conferences. And I went to my first multifamily conference in, I think that was like 2017.
Okay.
Because I had heard about it on a podcast or something like that and didn't really understand it. It didn't make sense to me at the time. And I think like a lot of people, right? You're like, well, that sounds weird. Only rich people can do that. So I went to this conference and it was kind of like drinking from a fire hose. It was just so much information over the course of 2 days between, the underwriting, the legal aspects, making the numbers work, building the team, like all this stuff. And I was just like, I was kind of overloaded at that point, but it kind of got the gears moving on, hey, maybe this is something I should look into more because it sounds like the real deal. So at that point, of course, they tried to pitch me their $25,000, coaching program right there. And I'm like, not right now, because again, I was brand new to this. And I also knew that I was about to get deployed for almost a year to Iraq again. And so I was like, it doesn't make sense. I wouldn't be able to take advantage of it, any of the courses or the coaches, right? I'm not going to call from Baghdad and talk to these coaches. Right. So what I thought in terms of a plan was to say, hey, okay, but maybe I can be the passive investor. I've got a little bit of capital saved up. Maybe I can be that LP. That's what we call the passive investors, and learn while I earn, right? Instead of paying someone a bunch of money to teach me, I'm going to invest a bunch of money and still have the ability to ask all the questions that I have. And hopefully I'm going to earn a lot of money doing it. Yeah. So that's what I decided to do. And that's when I first passively invested in the deal, was in 2017. And then fast forward a couple of years, after I got back from the deployment, I was pretty convinced that this is something that I wanted to do a little more actively. And after meeting a couple of folks that I was willing to work with, wound up getting in on a deal here in Tampa, which was a portfolio deal. And we, a whole bunch of us had just gotten back from, I think it was like a Rod Cleef event here in Tampa. And we were all, in the right mindset. We were jacked up and ready to go do our own deals. And they came to me and said, hey, Tim, you want to passively invest on this deal? And I was like, no, because I want to find my own deal, right? And I wanted to save up that capital to invest in my own deal. And everybody was trying to do the same thing until they came back to me a little bit later, like right before their deal was about to close. They were at the end of the race. And they're like, hey, if you still have that capital, we'd like to bring you in as a partner. Your boots on the ground, so you'll be able to help us out with a lot of aspects of the deal, etc. So would you like to come on as a GP? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, got kind of snuck into a deal. I like to call it, because it wasn't one that I put together, but I was able to, provide value to them as partners, and also bring a little bit of capital to the deal so that I can invest it. But then again, then it says that I'm investing in my own deal as well. Now, I didn't bring any investors into that deal, but that was okay. So it was a 59 unit portfolio deal here in Tampa Bay, and that one went great because it was during the anomaly that was COVID. So
Right. Okay. And what about the other folks that are on that team? That that's one nice thing about multifamily. It truly can be a team sport, and it sounds like for one to be able to get in on as a GP, with just bringing your capital, but being the boots on the ground is huge. That's just a huge in. And so, what were some of the other attributes of maybe some of your partners where you felt like they would complement maybe what you were able to do?
yeah, and so some of it was they had a little bit more experience than me. Even if they've done one more deal than you have, though, that could be a big difference in just understanding the process, right?
Right.
And obviously they had found the deal, so they brought a lot of value from that perspective.
From that standpoint, yeah.
Right, and one of them was in like construction management, so I knew that would definitely be a value add when it came to the renovations, the pace of renovations, the connections that he had within the local area, and so just having him doing oversight of that stuff, I felt very comfortable with that. Another partner was more of the managerial type, had a lot of experience in that regard, so I was very comfortable with him being the primary point person for the property manager, right? The asset management piece, overseeing the property management. And so that's what it really was. And some of it does come down to personalities. I mean, if you don't get along with these people, you're going to be dealing with them anywhere from, in this case, it was only like 3 years, but usually you're talking at least 5 years that you're going to be working with these people. If you can't, have a beer, coffee, whatever with them and get along with them, then that's going to be a problem. And you want to start looking for those red flags early, but I say early, but by that point, if you're in the deal already, it's too late.
Right.
And that certainly happened as well, right? Like, unfortunately, things seem all shiny and happy at the outset, but then once you get further into a deal, you realize that maybe your values aren't as aligned, or maybe your vision wasn't as aligned. But live and learn.
That's right. Okay, cool. And so from that one, do you remember on that one? Just curious, but I know you didn't raise the capital part of it, but do you know how much you had to raise and how much of that was for reno? And
I don't remember the hard numbers, because again, I underwrote it at the time for myself, but because I wasn't pitching it to anyone, I wasn't committing anything to memory. I could certainly look it up, but I don't know off the top of my head.
No big deal. Just figured I'd ask. And then from there, you were off to the races. What did you do? What'd you do next as far as investing?
Yeah, and so that was like 2019, right? I think when we got that one, and then from that one moved into another deal that I was brought in and so I started to find who I wanted to work with, basically. And so there was two or three of those folks that I worked on that first deal with that we felt like we gelled. And so when they had another deal, at that point, it's kind of like, if you enjoyed working with someone and they're a solid player, you'll call them up and say, "Hey, Tim, we got this deal. Is this something you want to come in on?" And so that's what started to happen at that point. So, Michael Blanc and others talk about the law of the first deal. I think that's really what the law of the first deal is the fact that people get to know you and, your reputation, work ethic, all that stuff. And then they decide right then and there whether they want to work with you or not again. And most of the time, these deals take a lot of people to turn into reality. And so you want to be one of those people that they're going to call up and say, hey, Tim, we think we got a good one. Is this something you're interested in? And so that's what started happening. And the first one that I raised on was actually a deal in Tallahassee. And that one was a student to conventional conversion, basically. So it was a student property, but it was old and outdated, needed a full reno. And we came in, they basically had gotten the last student out, and it was at 0% occupancy. And we did all the renovation on it, and then we started to lease it up. So that's a little hairy, because when you're starting at 0% occupancy, that's scary. And that was a 136 unit in Tallahassee.
Holy cow! 136 units at 0% 0% occupancy. Golly, how did you? How did y'all handle the? Maybe tell me a little more about that. How did you handle? Did you guys just have a certain amount of capital set aside for debt service, or what did you do to be able to kind of give yourself enough runway to turn that thing around?
Yeah, and so that's where like the whole nothing ever goes exactly the way you planned thing, right? There was so many things that, I think with the debt terms back then, it wasn't a huge concern because they were so low. We had the interest only period. We had also bought a rate cap even back then when nobody thought you would need it, which saved us later, obviously, when rates started to rise significantly. But we were good with the timeline that we had underwritten. It's just when problems started to arise, let's say the partner in the deal said that we need to have, new pipes, right? That wasn't necessarily budgeted, but okay, we'll get the new pipes. And then you're out of budget on that, right? Okay, racks it up. But the bigger problem is that it affects timelines when you're looking at how long it's going to take to reno this building. Because remember, you're at zero. You don't have any money in.
Right.
Anything that pushes the renovation timeline is like a domino effect on that. The only saving grace is that what we were able to do is we were able to finish each building one at a time and start leasing up each building, as opposed to finishing everything and then start leasing up, because that I don't think that would have been feasible at all. But then you just had other things. Sometimes it'll take the city longer to get you a permit for something, and that's something you have zero control over, but it still has a knock-on effect on your timeline, your budget, your lease up period. And so once you wind up getting knocked out of, say you assumed that you were going to start leasing up right before peak season starts, then if that gets pushed by 3 months, well, now you're basically starting lease up in the dead season, which is not where you want to be, right? So it's just, I think a lot of people don't think about how one little domino could start to push all the other ones down, especially on a really heavy lift deal, which this admittedly was. There was certainly good potential for return, and it's not done yet. We still have it.
Okay,
but
how's it performing now, Tim? And about how much of the reno and everything have you guys finished? What kind of occupancy are you seeing?
Yeah, so we got up to about 90% pre-leased, but then we hit like a spot where leasing just slowed down for some reason. So, we started having conversations with the property manager, and we're working with them right now to aggressively, do what we need to do, because nobody likes to cut rents on their properties. but we're in kind of a different market right now than obviously we were a year ago, right? Where
For
rents
sure.
only went one direction, and that's up. And then you have to take into account where that property is. If you're at 93%, you probably don't need to drop rates. But if you're at 83%, then you want to get to that 90 and then worry about raising rates. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're focusing on getting that lease up to where it needs to be and maintaining those numbers. Now, have we had to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations with investors to say, hey, we're not going to do distributions right now until we get these lease up numbers to where they need to be.
Yeah,
And that's no fun. Trust me, for a while it
exactly.
was nothing but raining money. And it's all good until it's not. And then once you have to start having those conversations, I think the key point is though that you have those conversations, right? If
For
things are
sure.
going bad and your operator is radio silent, as we say in the military, like goes quiet, that's when you really need to be concerned because um, you don't know how bad it is and you don't know what they're doing to fix it. So I think we've done a pretty good job of it, at least being transparent and continuing to communicate to investors what we're doing to get to where we need to be.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And what do you think as of right now? How much value you've been able to add to that particular one. I mean, if you're coming in, I don't know what you ended up purchasing it for, but obviously you've had to do renovations, all this other stuff. But at some point, if you've gotten up to close to 90% occupancy, I mean, gosh, that's got to be a very big swing on based on how much it's worth now versus when you purchased.
Yeah, and we've certainly added value, not just with the renovations themselves, but with the natural appreciation that's come over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And so we still I think the plan has it for like another 2 years,
Hmm.
right? So we have time to hold on to maybe the market's better, or we always have the option if it's not cash flowing and it's in the best interest, or if it's not, we're not able to do distributions. If it's in the best interest to just go get a broker opinion of value and sell it so that we can provide that return to investors, then we might choose to do that as well. But I think it's important to know what your options are and always be reviewing those options, especially as market dynamics change,
For sure.
as they as they have in the past year. You need to relook at your own business plan and say, hey, does this still make sense? And like I said, we always want to be doing distributions on all our properties, but um, maybe you deviate from the plan because it makes more sense for the investors. A good example is that Tampa portfolio, right? That was supposed to be a 5-year hold, but we were hitting all the numbers at year 3. Does it really make sense to hold on to it for 2 more years to try to squeeze a little more juice out of it when we could give investors the same returns in 3 years that we promised for 5? So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, it makes sense. I think you're right. You got to continue to, to analyze it and do what, I think that's a responsible thing to do, quite frankly, for the investors, right? To always look at it, especially right now with the changing environment. It is so much of a different market than it used to be. And so, you got to be open to reevaluating and saying, is this still the direction we want to go? And if not, what's a better solution? So.
yeah,
Well, good.
absolutely. And
Yeah, and so maybe Tim, from there, what else have you gotten into? And has all of these been kind of in the Florida area?
no, so we actually have most of our properties in Atlanta.
Oh,
Um, I
wow. Okay.
really personally, I really personally like Atlanta as a market. I think even through all the things that we're seeing right now, it's maintained its fundamentals with regards to population growth, job diversity, all the things that I'm looking for in a market. I haven't really seen those falter yet. So even rent growth, we haven't seen too many issues in keeping properties leased up in the Atlanta area. So really like Atlanta, but we also have, like I said, the one in Tallahassee. We also have one in Dallas as well.
Okay.
So we're not basically Sunbelt, I guess you could call it.
Sure.
But and right now, it's really a matter of looking at what makes sense, because it's so hard to find deals that pencil right now. Just in terms of the underwriting, we're finding that we're 1 million, 2 million off from what the sellers are asking, and that gap is starting to close as sellers kind of realize where we're at in this cycle. But we're finding other creative ways to get deals done, like loan assumptions. We
Right.
recently did a deal. I think the loan assumption was like 3.5% for 9 years,
Nice.
and that is amazing. So being able to do that gives our investors the predictability, and it also just mitigates risk, right? Because it's not a high rate, and you have it
For sure.
locked in for a long time. So all these positives, so stuff like that, just trying to find ways to make deals work and find those markets where numbers still make sense.
Yeah, that's great. And so what you mentioned being a passive investor as well. Are you, from a passive standpoint, invested primarily in multifamily, or have you gone to any other asset classes?
No, so I am, but I'd say I'm diversified in the sense that I'm more on the class A
Okay.
multifamily. So most of our deals are B and C,
Hmm.
and so you just have different aspects, both positive and negative of different every asset class, right? But I think that kind of diversifies me a bit by having it in that class A, which is not as price sensitive sometimes. So we go into a recession, stuff like that. And I use that for my solo 401k. So
Oh,
I
cool.
don't know if
Okay.
people are familiar, but if they have a 401k with a former employer, and a lot of times they leave their jobs and that money's just sitting there, like just doing its thing. But they don't realize that they have the opportunity to roll it over into a self-directed retirement account. And that's what I did. Mine happens to be a solo 401k, but it can just as easily be a regular self-directed IRA. And so I just use my retirement money to invest in Class A multifamily. I've had one deal exit already, and it's like doubled my money, and now it's in the next one. And after that, I probably will diversify because it'll hopefully be a larger sum.
Right. Right.
I'll diversify into different asset classes. I'm looking at triple net because that's like very safe,
Hmm.
and then other things like storage, self storage, and stuff like that. Just because they're interesting and I want to learn more about them. But I don't want to be doing the deals myself necessarily. So just like a passive investor, I'd be able to invest my money, ask the questions, learn more about the asset class without necessarily having to do all the work associated with it.
Right. Exactly. One question I have, maybe for the properties that you have in Florida, have you seen anything? I keep hearing about, increases in insurance rates, and some of them being dramatic. And then when I ask some people, they said, well, it really isn't that big of a deal. So what are you seeing with some of your properties in Florida?
Yeah, and so it is there is a range for sure. I went to a Tampa state of the multifamily market, I think it was,
Hmm.
where it was all these players from construction, design, insurance, etc. And one of the things that kept coming up was insurance, and some of the developers there were seeing 2 to 3 times increases in their insurance. And so that could kill a deal, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Luckily, we haven't seen that on like our property. Our property, it did go up about 50%, which we are thanking our lucky stars. And we were actually talking about it the other day. We're like, it's actually not bad. compared to what a lot of other people are saying. And I was having a conversation with an insurance agent about it too, and he's like, "Yeah, I mean, he's like 2 times is not uncommon in this market."
For sure. What about property management? Obviously, you're pretty spread out, but is your property management all dependent on the market itself? Do you have any properties that all roll up underneath one property management company, or what does that look like for you, your investments?
Yeah, that's it's very market specific, right? Because we want the people who are the local experts,
Hmm.
and they understand not just that area, but also that asset class. I think the trap that some operators get in is they say, "Oh, we'll hire so and so company because they know Dallas, whatever." But maybe their specialty is Class A, right? And
Right.
you're
Good
asking
point.
them to manage your Class C property that's a heavy value add. They may not have the tools and the expertise to deal with that unique set of challenges that comes with Class C heavy value add versus Class A. So we really make sure that one, they're the regional experts, but two, that they are experts in what we're asking them to do, which is manage this type of asset class. And then also, sometimes we have them manage the construction as well, the renovations. So if that's the case, if we are asking them to do that, then they obviously need to have that skill set in house as well.
Okay. And then, yeah, I guess we're kind of getting a little bit long on the time, and so I got some other questions for you though. If you have a minute, I guess let's start with though where people can find out more about you and what you're doing.
Sure, they can find me or they can contact me anytime at tim@zanainvestments.com. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so please find me there, Tim Little, Zana Investments. And then I'm on all the socials if you look for me. And I also have a podcast if they're interested in that, which I'm assuming they are, which
Yeah.
is called Journey to Multifamily Millions. So please check that out if you have the time.
Awesome. Sounds real good, Tim. And I've enjoyed having you on. I've got, like I say, just one or two other questions for you. Number one would be, what advice you have for a new investor, somebody that's maybe just starting their journey.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on what they want to do, right? Do they want to remain that passive investor, or maybe they're just exploring passive investing for the first time? I would say, obviously, educate yourself on it. Listen to podcasts like this. Read a couple of books on the subject, and that'll set you up well to ask the right questions, which sometimes is the most important piece of this, right? So
For
when
sure.
you that first time you call an operator as a passive investor, I know I was like nervous that I was going to ask stupid questions, and I definitely did. But that operator was gracious enough to say, no, that's fine. Here's what you really need to focus on though, or kind of give me the direction and the answers that I needed to know what I should be asking for next time. So that's the biggest thing I would say is, yeah, obviously educate yourself, but don't be afraid to ask stupid questions, because until you ask those questions, you won't know what you need to know, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. I always ask each guest as well for a book recommendation, but I'm gonna say that you can't say "The Obstacle Is the Way," which is a great one. I'm seeing them on the back of your, and Hunter Thompson's "Raising Capital." It looks like "Rich Dad Poor Dad." Who, not how. I keep getting that one, and it's a great book, and I know why I'm getting it. I have not actually. I've probably heard of Influence, but I haven't read Influence. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your take on that. And then one other book.
Okay, yeah, influence is a good one. Cialdini. Um, it basically goes into the ways in which we are influenced by ads and salespeople and stuff like that. So one gives you the tools to understand how to use all those different of methods of influence, not in like a sleazy way, but just in a way to do your business.
Yeah.
And it also gives you ways to use it defensively so that you understand if someone is trying to, or something is trying to influence you into making a certain decision, buying a certain thing. So it just brings greater awareness to like the psychology aspect of selling, I guess.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Okay. How about any other books that you'd like to recommend?
Sure. I guess, I mean, I don't know if I could recommend it yet because I'm not that far into it, but I'm listening to one of the other books by the Who Not How folks.
Yeah.
The 10X is easier than 2X,
Yeah. That's a
which
great one.
is on my Audible right now. And I take walks in the morning sometimes to get my steps in, before the kids and the rest of the family wake up and everything. And I've been listening to that and it's pretty good so far.
Okay. And when you're not investing, and it sounds like you've got kids, you're married. What do you do though for fun?
Yeah, what do we do? I mean, we try to travel when we can. Haven't been doing as much of it lately, but I think the last trip we took was the Disney cruise, probably.
Oh, cool.
So that was a whole lot of fun. It was the first Disney cruise we'd ever been on. We got amazing rates because it was just after COVID when they were still kind of hurting. And other than that, yeah, really just Florida is a great place. Don't get me wrong; it gets a little hot in the summer,
Right.
but
Yeah.
there's a lot to do, especially even here in the Tampa Bay area. And then once you include Orlando and all the touristy stuff that has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Tim, I've enjoyed our time together. I really appreciate you being on the Wealth Flow, and just can't thank you enough. So appreciate it, and I guess we'll call it a show.
All right, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Keith.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.